Yesterday was a big day here at Spirit of Joy. Dave Drays, John Lurch, Chris Bovey, and about 50 of their best friends were here for a congregational work day. And so many things got done. It was an incredible blessing. My favorite part of the work day, though, was showing off pictures of my new granddaughter. So it was a big week in our household. Little Eloise came into the world, and Graham didn't melt down too badly. And so it was just an incredible gift to have this little girl in our life and in our family. And as she was coming into this world, I realized something, and it is actually kind of embarrassing. I don't know if you guys have heard of any of this, but when she was born, she was naked. Have you ever heard of that? She was naked when she was born. And that means everything that she has is a gift. That little blanket that she's wrapped in, that little headband around her head, everything she has is a gift from her father and her mother. It is a gift. How many of us stop enough to think about life as that incredible gift that is from God in our lives? I have a friend that he's been through so many health problems in his family. It's just like one after another after another. Thankfully, there is insurance, but even the insurance can't possibly cover the amount that they've spent on co-pays and things like that. It is just astronomical in cost. And I've asked him from time to time, how are you guys doing? And he knows I'm talking about the financial part. The other part we deal with a lot. But sometimes we go through and, how are you guys doing financially with all of this? And he said to me, you know what? I came into this world naked. If I go out of this world with a suit of clothes on my back in my coffin, I've died a rich man. It's not about the things in this world. It's about that gift of family that is around us. Isn't that a profound perspective? That everything we have is a gift from God. And when we look at our possessions in life, how many of us, if we're honest, doesn't matter how we feel some days, how many of us are rich? We truly are. We are rich beyond measure in our culture. Now, there's a sense of stewardship in that, isn't there? If all I have is the clothes on my back, I'm rich. There's a perspective, there's a trust that comes from this. And yes, it's that time of year in the life of a church where we talk about stewardship. But I want to tell you, I don't think you're going to hear me mention the word money today. Because stewardship is not about money. It is about a matter of the heart. And so I want you to listen for this sense of simplicity that is here. These 12, and you heard it in our gospel lesson for today, right? These 12, Jesus sent out saying, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, don't take anything with you. Don't take gold coins or silver coins or even the little copper coins. Don't take an extra suitcase with you on your journey. Don't take an extra tunic or sandals or even a walking stick. Do you hear that sense of simplicity on that journey? I want you to go out into this world without stuff. I want you to go out trusting only me. So I want to contrast this to a story that I actually read the youth on Wednesday. It says, this was a study from Study Finds, John Anderer, and he says, a new survey has revealed some troubling statistics regarding how young adults see themselves. 3/4 of young adults admit that they feel constantly overwhelmed. By what? They started listing things. By the pressure to find a career, to make enough money, to find a meaningful romantic relationship. Young adults. Who am I going to be paired with for the rest of my life? To succeed in their work, to maintain a presence on social media, to meet others' expectations, to even do simple things like eat enough fruits and vegetables. He said 80% say that these worries have negatively impacted their sleep. 79% admit that their overall mental health has suffered. An astounding 8 in 10 flat out believe that they are not good enough in virtually all areas of their lives. Now, do you hear the simplicity in that? Jesus came to offer us simplicity. And here we are at this time in our juncture in history where there is just stress after stress after stress. Anybody felt that in their lives? So why is that? Do you remember this old Shaker song? 'Tis a gift to be simple. 'Tis a gift to be free. 'Tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. You ever heard that? How many of you can just, you hear those words and there's something true and freeing in it? 'Tis a gift to be simple. 'Tis a gift to be free, till by turning and turning, we come round right. How many of us need to turn a little bit to come down right and discover that simplicity that's supposed to be in our lives? This is the invitation that actually the gospel brings to us. The gospel isn't meant to be complicated. It is meant to be freeing in our lives. I want you to take a look. We're at John chapter 10. You heard me read it in our gospel lesson for today. But I want you to listen to some of the context for this today. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every sickness among the people. He cured demoniacs, epileptics, and paralytics. He cured them all. And great crowds followed him. So that's our context in Matthew 4. Everything that we've done has kind of been set up for the last few weeks from this passage. This is what Jesus has been doing. But now look here at Matthew 10. Then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits, to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness, and to proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Now I want you to focus on that for just a second, because Jesus essentially did two things in that early portion of his ministry. He was proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and he was curing every sickness. His basic work that we've seen for the last few weeks, right? All right. So look at what he calls the 12 disciples to do. In yellow, to proclaim the good news of the kingdom. In the blue, and to cure every disease and every sickness. What were the disciples called to do? They were called to do what Jesus did in his life, weren't they? What do you think that we then are called to do if we're disciples? We are to do what Jesus did. So let me give you another piece of this. Jesus said to the 12, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Did Jesus go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? Now are the 12 to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? Yes. And they were called to simplicity on this journey. They were called to take no gold or silver or copper, no bag for their journey, no extra stuff to go along with them. Did Jesus model that in his ministry? Son of Man had nowhere to lay his head, right? And so here is that sense of we are called to do what Jesus did. Now, if we go do what Jesus did, do you think we're going to find more peace? If we don't do what Jesus did, do you think we're going to find less peace? So the question is, are we doing what Jesus did? Okay? Now, if we turn to Matthew 10, we can work all the way through this. He set this up at the end of chapter 9 by saying the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And then he sent 12 out into the harvest. And we saw the names when we were reading this earlier. If you look down at verse 2, he called Simon, who was also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew. Remember how he called them fishermen by the sea? And then he called James and John, the sons of Zebedee. They were fishermen. And then he began to call others. He called Philip and Bartholomew. He called Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. Matthew's writing this. He called Matthew. Remember how Matthew left everything to go and follow? He left his whole job. It wasn't a job he could go back to. You say goodbye to the Roman government, you said goodbye to the Roman government. But he left everything and followed. And then James, there's another James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus. There's another Simon, this one the Canaanian. And of course there was Judas, the one who would betray him. And as we read through, we can do this. Jesus sent out the 12 following instructions: go nowhere among the Gentiles, but go to the house of the lost sheep of Israel. And where you go, proclaim the good news. And so he went on and on. He said, don't take a bag with you, right? When you go simply. He goes on to say, you received without payment. You received this good news. Now give that without payment. It's not about what you are making. It's what you are giving that matters. And on this goes. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. If they invite you in to receive not just you, but the gospel, let not just your peace, but it's the peace of God stay upon this house. So that's our story for today. And I want to ask you, do you see any stewardship in that passage? Do you see some of that there? Take a look at some of this. These 12 disciples Jesus sent out saying, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go, proclaim the good news, cure the sick, cast out the demons. Right? So they had a job to do. Now, here's what I want you to think of. In stewardship, we have two choices. In stewardship, we are either the audience or we are the actors. You ever heard people say this with worship? Some people look at church and things where they're the audience, all right? And the pastor and the band is up there to be the performers. And we're the audience because it's about us and we're to receive, right? Is that the way it's supposed to be? Who's supposed to be the audience? God is supposed to be the audience, and we're supposed to be the actors. But if you want to look at stewardship in terms of being an audience, the actors, the disciples, were going out, right? And what does it say that the audience, those who were new, those who were not yet Christians, were supposed to do? Laborers deserve their food. That means If we look at ourselves as the audience, we are to provide the laborers their food. We are to provide for the church. I don't know if you've thought about this. One of our best staff members here at Spirit of Joy winds up actually interfacing and working closely every week with about 150 or 200 homeschoolers that come through here. When Spirit of Joy started 25 years ago, the first pastor said, I want us to start a school. We have a couple hundred kids coming through here for schooling all the time. One of those, this staff member I'm talking about, actually was here when Jenna went through homeschooling here. And we have shaped and fashioned all of this. That's one of our staff members. One of our staff members works every week with Alcoholics Anonymous. And they work closely with them. I tell people we as a church are in the resurrection business. Why do we do Alcoholics Anonymous? Because there's resurrections here. I befriended recently a man in our community. He's a businessman, just this honest man of integrity. And I was talking to him the other day. He and his wife in the last 5 years have started going to church, and it's so important in their lives. But he said, hey, I happened to drive by your church the other day. You guys do AA, don't you? I said, yeah, we do AA. I said, we do NA, and we do a few other A's that are there. And he said, you guys do NA? He said, 17 years ago, I was living out of the back of my car. I was stealing pennies and quarters from my customers. And I couldn't make life work. If it wasn't for NA, I don't know where I'd be in life. We have a staff member that works with them, who works directly with Girl Scouts and all of those things. Do you know who that staff member I'm talking about is? It's our building here at church. Have you ever thought of our building being part of our ministry? We have 150 to 200 kids that are coming, not only learning to think, but God is woven into what they're learning. Our building supports. All we have to do is open the doors, and it takes a little wear and tear. And we have alcoholics that are coming to freedom. People who are addicted to heroin and cocaine coming to freedom in this place. You know, if you want to look at it from the sense of we are the audience, what we are called to do, laborers deserve their food, is we are called to give to the needs of the church. You see that perspective? But that's not what I'm going to focus on today. Because what I want to focus on is, are we the actors? Are we the audience now? Or are we called to be the actors? We are called to be the disciples. We are the ones who are called, and God raises the bar a little bit, to go without gold or silver or copper in our belts, no bag for our journey. How could we be less encumbered on our journey? Is simplicity the way that you would describe our culture today? No, not at all. And, I mean, we just live in this crazy world of complexity that's all around us, aren't we? I mean, even our bodies are so complex. We have 100 million neurons in our bodies. Did you know that in every single one of our cells is a supercomputer? There is more information encoded in our teeny tiny DNA than there is in most computers in this world. What God has created is amazing. We just have to look around this world to see the complexity that is there. And then we're making it worse for ourselves. How many of you know that information is absolutely exploding in this world? We have so much stuff that is there and all around us. I think about my grandfather. My grandfather was a farmer. Think about him back in the 1930s on his simple tractor. Okay? What did he do most all day? He'd drive a quarter mile this way, and he'd turn around and drive a quarter mile this way, day after day. And he was deeper than most of us because he had time to think. They didn't have radios on their tractors back then. Nowadays they have GPS and television sets on their tractors so that it can drive for you. You just have to sit there and make sure nothing goes wrong. And you can watch a whole season of a show on Netflix while you're plowing the field. But they had simplicity that we lack in our lives. We instead have urgency and noise. And we have anxiety and stress and depression and ulcers and migraines. That's me. And sleeplessness and increasing suicide rates. Are we healthy in our world? How do you feel like you're in the rat race, you're on a merry-go-round, and you want to get off some days? But simplicity, and here's the gift, ushers us into the throne room of peace and power. Now, one of the books I read this week kind of preparing for this was Richard Foster, a famous spiritual thinker. And he was talking about, he has a book on simplicity. And the way that I made my life maybe doable this week when I went to Chattanooga and back to meet a little grandbaby was listening to it on tape. And so these are kind of quotes from them because this was as best as I could do in remembering them. And simplicity for me was not going and looking up every reference to make sure it was absolutely right. But between Richard Foster and I, that was a good point. Simplicity ushers us into the throne room of peace and of power. When we're so tired, do we have power and purpose in our lives? We're just caught in this maze that is around us. Now, remember a few weeks ago when we started the Gospel of Matthew, when we began to look toward the Beatitudes. Remember how they start, blessed are the poor, blessed are this, blessed are, well, another word for that is happy. And so we begin to talk about what happiness is in our lives. And so I gave you an example. I said this is obviously our world, and this is the kingdom of heaven. And there's a problem, though. Our world is darkened by sin. So you remember this, right? Our world is darkened by sin. But when Jesus came into this world, his first words were, behold, the kingdom of heaven has come near. And so wherever Jesus is, there is light in the midst of this. The kingdom, we're not fully in the kingdom yet, but we can be at that intersection. And so I illustrated a slightly different way. I illustrated it side by side. And I used this quote, the tree of happiness, anybody remember the next part? Doesn't grow in the cursed earth. Do you remember that? The tree of happiness doesn't grow in the cursed earth. We keep looking for happiness down here with our things and our stuff, but the tree of happiness doesn't grow in the cursed earth. And then this week I found this quote. Happiness is becoming like Jesus. So remember what Jesus said to the 12? He said, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Was that what Jesus did? Happiness is becoming like Jesus. He says, as you go, proclaim the good news. Is that what Jesus did? That's what the disciples were to do. And there was a tree of happiness. They were to do what Jesus was doing. And the question is, can we do that and find greater peace for our lives? Can we go to the lost? Can we proclaim the good news And can we be unencumbered with less stuff? Is that maybe the call to what we are to do in our lives? Now, here's another favorite quote that I found along as I was driving and researching. It says, "You cannot come to a true, rich, abiding simplicity in a few simple steps." I know you think there can be a few simple steps to doing this. So you can't do it in a few simple steps. So what am I going to do? I'm going to give you a couple steps. And here are the steps. We need to desire it. We need to decide what we're going to do. And we need to dedicate ourselves to it. That's it, very simply. How many of you desire simplicity? What are you going to do to get there? Did we actually hand out today the sheets that said "'tis a gift to be simple" on it? Did we hand those out? Very good. For someone like husbands and wives are sitting together that have two, can I borrow one? All right. Here's what I want you to do. Thank you, David. The benefits of simple living are peace of mind, higher productivity, there's clarity, there's focus, there's all kinds of freedoms, including from possessions and from comparing ourselves to our neighbors. There's financial savings that occur if we live more simply. Maybe the greatest benefit is it refocuses us on God. Am I dependent on the stuff, or am I dependent on God? And I'm just going to read this. I'm going to read the bold parts. And you just read, because I want to just percolate things in your mind. How could I be more simple when life is complex? So, how to live more simply? Clarify what is your most important thing. So, and then you read, there are limited hours in the day. So read with me. There are limited hours in the day. What should you focus on? Set up simple routines. I'm not a big routine guy, but it's true. Declutter. Digitally declutter. Separate needs and wants. Quit overthinking things. Choose quality over quantity. Limit spending. Live within your means. Eat better, exercise more, pray more. Play good music, read good books. Stop comparing yourself to others. Forgive others. Settle for good enough. Get rid of bad habits. Learn to say yes and no. So, desire, decide, dedicate. Okay? How many of us, do you see something on that list where you go through and you say, you know, if I did that, things would be simpler? I hear a staff member up here laughing like all of them. But here's what I want you to do. If you want more simplicity in your life, we've got to first desire it, because there's nothing's going to go. We've got to decide what we're going to do, and then we need to dedicate ourselves to it. And I want to tell you, what I'm talking about here, I'm not talking about legalistically. Okay, I could do that legalistically, right? What I want to talk about is the freedom that occurs. We have so much stress in our world today. And I want us to discover that sense of freedom that God really intended. So I want to give you a few quick snapshots. Here's what the Bible says about simplicity. In the Old Testament, it's rooted in creation. In creation, it's like God, He just wanted to give you good things. Isn't that what creation says? God wanted to give you good things. But in the fall, Adam and Eve mistrusted the provision of God and took things into their own hands. Do we do that? In the wilderness, the Israelites mistrusted the provision of God and took more manna than for just one day. In the commandments, God warned us against covetousness and the idolatrous desire for things. There's the principle of the tithe. It started with Abraham. When he met the first priest he ever met, he just immediately gave him 10% of everything he had. There's the principle of gleaning. Remember what gleaning is? Farmers, you're allowed to harvest from the center of your field, but leave the edges free for the poor so that they may eat. That's how Ruth and Naomi survived when they got back to the promised land. Remember the principle of the Jubilee. Every 50 years, 7 Sabbaths, 7 sets of 7, what we are to do is to reset everything. Because the land doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. And after 50 years, things get out of balance. And God said, it's time to put them back in balance. And we're to trust Him again that we will have enough. And by so doing, take care of the poor. In the New Testament, by the time of Jesus, we hear the kingdom principles. Matthew 6, Sermon on the Mount, is beautiful with this. He reminds us that joy doesn't flow from storing up treasures on earth. Is that true? It comes from storing up treasures in heaven. And Jesus reflects the confidence of God's provision. Just as God provides for the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, we trust that He will provide for us. There's tithing. Did you know that tithing is not really a New Testament perspective? It's an Old Testament perspective. It's not that they disagree with it, but you know what the thing with tithing was? It wasn't radical enough for the joy that Jesus had in store. Have you thought about that? Tithing wasn't radical, and this is a good starting point. But it wasn't radical enough. Peter and Andrew left their nets and everything they had. Matthew left his job with the Romans that was making him rich. Remember the leader of the synagogue last week who came and bowed down before Jesus because his child was dying. He had to give up that authority to follow a new religious system, which was Jesus, which is the way it was intended in the first place. But do you remember how the rich young ruler, he was challenged to give away everything he had and give the money to the poor. And he went away sad because he had many possessions. Tithing is a starting point, but God had in mind something more radical and more freeing and good. I like this sense that it was about the heart. Pharisees, when they tithed, and they did tithe in the New Testament, they did it, they tithed the mint and the dill, but their hearts weren't there. They didn't care about justice and mercy. They didn't care about other people. Kurt and Margaret Stork, their daughter this week. They had a member in their church, a little girl who had a kidney that wasn't functioning. And so she went in and said, I wonder if I could be a match. I mean, isn't that radical generosity? She wasn't a match for the little girl, but the registry showed that she was a match for someone else. She's giving away her kidney this week to someone she doesn't even know. It is radical generosity. It seems like all the great Christian leaders and thinkers of history had this principle of simplicity in their lives. The Apostle Paul, do you see if you remember this verse? I have learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. So in any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret to being well-fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Right? That sense of, do you hear that sense? I've learned to be content whatever I have. Where did he write this from? From prison. I've learned the sense to be content with what I have. Is that the model for our culture right now? No. There were the desert fathers and mothers 1,700 years ago. They left the materialism of their culture. Where was the level of the materialism of their culture compared to ours? Right? But they left it to find simplicity in the wilderness. St. Francis of Assisi, he found simplicity and joy, and it changed his corner of Europe. Generosity, as I've been reading this with Richard Foster, just kept coming in. It wasn't just simplicity. It was now turning it around and blessing others. You know, we hear that famous phrase is to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. I love this quote, with simplicity, people become more important to us than possessions. Isn't that interesting? We can't respond to the needs of those around us without simplicity. He quoted Martin Luther. His book, The Freedom of a Christian, is about simplicity. It's about how grace and the freedom to love empower us to serve our neighbor. George Fox and the Quakers were known for their simplicity, but also then their generosity. George Mueller and his orphanages, he never asked for a dime to support hundreds of orphans. He just prayed and money showed up. Charles Wesley once said to his sister Bonnie that money never stays with me. It would burden me if it did. Do you know what Charles Wesley's will was like when he died? He didn't bother to leave one. Like my friend who had health problems in their family, he had a change of clothes and $18 in his pocket. He spent his life transforming parts of America. How about the modern missionaries? They're obviously defined by simplicity. I love the story of Hudson Taylor before he went to China. Before he went to China, he started depriving himself of everything that was here, of meats and cheeses and dairy and fats and all of those things, and started just eating oatmeal and rice so that when he got there, he wouldn't be surprised by the simplicity that was there and the meager provisions that were there. And do you know what? From his tiny little salary as a missionary, he gave away 2/3 of what he had. And he said, my experience was the less I spent on myself and the more I spent on others, the more joyful my life became. So how many of you are hungry for that? That sense of simplicity. We're going to just lightly hold this before us for these next couple weeks. I mean, really lightly, because it's not legalistic. And you know what I've thought about when I did this? It's like, this is the worst time of year to talk about simplicity. How many already know that you're going in debt because of the shopping that you're going to be doing in the next several weeks? Someone gave me a book several years ago called The $100 Christmas. And they urged people to lives of simplicity, to making the holidays simple. Okay, so here's the truth. It was a 20-year-old book, so now we could inflation do the $200. But could we actually do that? Could our lives be that simple? That it's not about the stuff? I can remember, other than the things that I looked at the Sears catalog for hours, and I got $25 that I could spend at Christmas when I was little. Other than those things, I can remember 3 gifts for Christmas. One, I was a young guy, had just moved to Denver, Colorado, and I got a nice coat. That was really appreciated. I needed a nice coat. But do you know what the other gifts that I can remember as my family? We started doing love gifts because there was a time when 3 of us were in college. And I'll do something for you. I'll clean the bathroom for you. I'll do this for you. Another time, my mom checked out cookbooks at the library. Gave one of us seafood, one of us Mexican, one of us Oriental food. And said, pick out a meal and we'll spend time cooking it together. Do our lives have to be about stuff? Or are we going to find freedom just by being more simple and discovering what that does? Now, you guys are generous as a church. I don't have to talk about money. Stewardship is about faith. And it's about freedom. And so I just want to encourage you this year not to think about stewardship as stuff, but to think about, is God really able to speak into my life through simplicity? A couple more quotes. Simplicity is the life of unhurried centeredness. Less stuff I have, the more time I have to be with God. Simplicity is responding to the demands of life from the divine center. Simplicity is how we're coming alive to God. For our closing prayer, I want to sing this song real quick here. I'm going to sing the first refrain, and then we'll go back to the beginning. So I'll do "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple," and then I'll go back to "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." And then let's sing as our prayer all together, the end. But it's that sense of till turning, we come round right. And that's my prayer for you for this next few weeks. So you probably know it, but "'tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight." Back to the beginning. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. Amen. Amen.
From the ends of the earth, from the depths of the sea, from the heights of the heavens, your name be praised. From the hearts of the weak, from the shouts of the strong, from the lips of all people, this song we raise, Lord, throughout the endless ages. You will be crowned with praises, Lord, Most High, exalted in every nation, sovereign of all creation, Lord, Most High, be magnified. From the ends of the earth, from the depths of the sea, from the heights of the heavens, your name be praised. From the hearts of the weak, from the hearts of the weak, from the shouts of the strong, from the lips of all people, this song we raise, Lord, throughout the endless ages. You will be crowned with praises, Lord, Most High, exalted in every nation, sovereign of all creation, Lord, Most High, be magnified, be magnified, be magnified.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen. Go in peace, serve the